In this episode, we present historic food preservation techniques for educational purposes only. If you choose to attempt this, keep in mind modern food safety rules. Welcome to Civil War Digital Digest. I'm Will. Well, we're fortunate to be back at the Henry Ford with historian Brian James Egen for our continuing discussion of pork during the Civil War. And today, Brian's going to teach us one of the two processes of how to cure pork to save it long term. This is called the dry cure.
It is. The dry cure, brine cure, those are the two primary methods of curing meat. Today we're going to talk about dry cure,
and
dry rub.
Where would we have found the dry rub in the Civil War world?
In the Civil War world, you're going to see dry rub used in rural areas, on farms, just about everybody that was putting up their own meat, because that is how you're going to cure your large cuts of meat.
And just about everybody that's putting up their own meat. We're talking 4 out of 5 Americans still live on a farm.
That's right. Over 80% of people are connected to agriculture, living on farms, somehow connected to the rural area. So this is what you're going to see. And with curing, the dry curing, you're going to see only the large cuts of meats, the hams, the shoulders, roast possibly, and bacon. And bacon is in terms of a big slab. And the reason that you're going to dry cure those pieces is because they're large pieces of meat that the cure application is going to be most effective.
Great. Well, let's start here. We have bacon in front of us. Everybody, most everybody anyway, loves bacon. Where does bacon come from?
Bacon is basically the side, somewhat of the belly of the pig. It's the area between the ribs and the outer layer of the pig's skin. And that has an area, primarily a lot of fat, lard, but there's also some meat in there as well.
And that meat we love the taste of, so let's figure out how to put it up so we can eat it at another time. How long is this process going to take us?
Well, actually drying or putting the dry rub on is just going to take a few minutes for what we have here today. But in terms of the curing process, slab bacon, anywhere from 2 to 4 weeks. It generally depends on how thick your meat is. Ideally, every 7 days, you're going to put a new application of salt in for every inch of meat that you have.
Okay, great. Well, let's talk about getting ready. We've got 2 pieces in front of us, and you've told me that this one is pretty well ready to go. This one still needs work before I would dry cure it. What am I looking at and what's wrong here?
When you do a dry rub, whether it's ham, whether it's the bacon, what you're going to want to avoid are these crevices and cracks, because that's where bacteria can get in, basically the water, the moisture. So what I would do is I would just take this and trim off as much as I can to make it a nice flat surface.
Great, and then I'm going to throw this excess away, right?
No, absolutely not. These excess trimmings, you're going to grind up into sausage, and that is where sausage meat is.
Again, we're going to use as much of the hog as possible.
Absolutely. So why don't we set this aside? This one is very close and ready to start the dry rub. I would square up this edge a bit of the bacon here. Again, we're not going to throw this away because that's good sausage meat right there. Now, Will, what does that look like to you if you were to slice it?
That looks like bacon like you'd find in the store today, Brian.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm going to probably trim off a little bit on this side as well. Now, all lard. I would not probably put that piece into the sausage.
What would you do with it?
I would cube this up, and then we would melt this down, and it's called rendering the lard. And then the purified lard you can use for all sorts of different things, whether it's cooking or preserving meats.
That sounds like a discussion for another day as well.
It does. So this slab looks pretty good. We want to make sure that there aren't any deep crevices in this. It looks pretty good. And again, you want to preserve your largest cuts of meat because it's more efficient.
Okay, so we've butchered, and we now have a piece of bacon that you've squared up and you're ready to go with. How do we cure this?
So to cure meat, the primary ingredient is salt. Okay, there's misnomers out there about smoking and other forms, but salting is the primary ingredient to actually cure meat.
And what are we looking to do with the salt?
And so what we're looking to do with the salt is salt, and I'd like to tell school kids is when you eat a lot of salty food, what happens? You get thirsty because the salt is drawing the moisture out of your mouth, out of your body. The same thing, the salt, we want to draw the moisture out of the meat because the moisture is where bacteria can grow, and that's what can spoil your meat. So if there's no moisture, then it's perfectly
Great.
fine.
Well, if we were just salting bacon, we'd call this salting bacon, but we're now talking about curing bacon.
That's right.
What's in here?
So what we mixed here is some salt with some brown sugar and some spices. Black pepper is a common spice that you would do, and that the spicing could be up to your personal preference. But you're going to want salt as your primary ingredient, sodium nitrate, that's going to be drawing the moisture out of the meat. And the sugar, generally it's brown sugar, it helps temper the salt.
Okay, and of course in a modern context, people may also be using a nitrite cure in there, like a pink salt or something like that. Since we're doing a Civil War preparation here, something that we're not going to use today.
That's right. And a sodium nitrite, like the pink salt you're talking about, is a natural occurring process once the sodium nitrate, our salt, touches water, touches the bacteria. Over time, it converts to a sodium nitrite.
So it's going to take us just a little bit longer to cure than somebody who'd be using a modern method.
Correct, absolutely.
Okay.
So Will, why don't we get started here?
Great, what do I do?
So just go scoop some out. We're going to put a nice half-inch bed underneath. And you have to remember, too, while you're doing this, you'll be having tons of hams and bacons laid out. Just a nice big base there.
We're ready to put the bacon on the cure, right? Or on the base of the cure, the bottom here. We have one thing that's missing. We had to source it through modern sources, the slab of bacon today. What am I missing here?
You're missing the skin. And generally speaking, on the slab bacon in the 19th century, you wouldn't have cut the skin off. There's really no reason to do it. It also will help create a protective barrier for your meat on the one side as well.
But we're okay to do it with this.
We're perfectly okay to do that. So what we're going to do is you got a nice bed of salt on. Again, the whole table would be covered with a nice bed of salt.
So what you're saying is the salt goes outside the surface area of the bacon.
Absolutely, absolutely. So go ahead and just grab some in there.
And this is more of the cure.
This is the cure. That's basically salt and some brown sugar. And how you were patting in there is exactly what you're going to want to do. And if you do have some like flaps, and I don't want to say too deep of crevices, but you just want to really pack that in there. You can't pack it in too much.
And I assume I'm building up on the sides too?
Yeah, you're going to want to, and if there's overbit, you just want to really encase it entirely, because what you're trying to do is get every exposed surface covered with the salt. And then once it's fully cured, this meat will last indefinitely.
Great, okay. So we're going to get this so we're totally covered. Want to make sure it's built up. I don't see edges there, right? So something like this,
Yep.
I don't have enough yet.
Right, absolutely.
Give you a little bit more there.
Now, overnight, especially like if we were going to be doing a ham, there would be water and juices all over the table.
Why is that, Brian?
Because, as we were talking earlier, the salt is going to start drawing that moisture out of the meat.
Okay.
And that's exactly what we want. Now, this looks pretty good. I mean, that's awesome.
Great. So where do I put this?
So this would have been done in the cold room.
You're changing the application or the cure every week.
Generally speaking, it's about 7 days per inch of thickness of your meat.
Okay, so for the bacon, about once a week.
About once a week for probably 2 weeks or so that it will take to cure this piece of bacon.
And you say about 2 weeks. How do I know?
Well, generally speaking, you know when no more juice, no more water is being extracted from your slab of meat. Also, just through time, generational knowledge, expertise, you kind of have formulas for knowing how long a certain size.
So the fact that you say a couple of weeks for bacon is you've worked here at the Firestone Farm for years. You guys do this every winter. We know the bacon at this thickness is going to take this long.
That's right, and this is a traditional process that's been in this country for decades. Hundreds of years.
Well, let's flash forward a couple of weeks. We're not going to sit here and wait for 2 weeks. We don't make you guys wait sometimes for 20 seconds of cutting up in episodes. What we have here comes out of the Firestone Farm cold room, and this is a piece of cured bacon.
That's right. After about the 2 to 4 week time period, you would scrape off all of the loose salt, soak it for a while in warm water. I know it's counterintuitive you just took all the water out. Are you going to be putting the water back into it? But basically, it cleans off all the residual salt to keep the salt from leaching out. But again, you want the sodium nitrates to stay in your meat.
So you're only soaking for a short amount of time.
You're soaking for a short period of time.
Like what do you say when a short period of time?
I would say no more than an hour.
Okay. But it's not just a dip and pull. You're
It's not
actually-
a dip and pull, and you're gonna, sort of pat dry it off and just sort of let it sort of naturalize or equalize. And then after, usually an overnight, and again, when it's cooled, you'd put it in a muslin cheesecloth bag, and then you would hang it in a nice cold area. Generally, a cold room is what everybody had in their cellar.
Okay, well, the cold room is something we'll talk about in another episode here, but from a freshly butchered set of bacon to set cured for the first time to ready to hang in a cold room until it's needed some months down the road, this is our bacon from beginning to waiting for the exact time to be made into a meal.
That's right. And if Mom said, hey, we're going to have some meat, which was 3 times a day, generally speaking, the youngest kid in the family would run down and cut off what you need, put it back in the bag, and hang it back up.
Outstanding. Well, there's a little bit of a connection to the Civil War and to food and how to care for food to make sure you can eat months down the road. Thank you for spending your time with us at Civil War Digital Digest. We hope you've enjoyed this. We want to say thanks to our patrons over on Patreon. We'll see you real soon.